When I was in college, I had a job counting cars. A lot of people mishear me and think that I'm some sort of math genius that was counting cars, and I'm not. In reality, this is what I was doing. I was on the side of the freeway working for the DMV, literally counting cars as they drove by in my assigned lane. So obviously this was super exciting. So my coworkers and I started making up stories about the drivers. My stories always revolved around the people going off to do something absolutely amazing and incredible. They were going to end world hunger or cure cancer or be school teachers. And one of my coworkers finally got annoyed and said, "Ashleigh, not everyone can be a superhero." I think this is kind of a sad statement because my son, who's 5 years old, is Batman every single day. And his friends are Captain America and Snake Man every single day. And a lot of us grow up and all we want to do is change the world. That is our entire goal in life. And somehow, as we get older, that desire and that belief in our capacity to change the world starts to diminish. We let trauma, we let money, we let other elements impact our belief in our own ability to change the world. When I think of professional superheroes, I think of firefighters and police officers, teachers, nurses. However, these are some of the positions that have the largest amount of turnover in the entire country. You've probably heard a lot about the teacher shortage right here in Arizona, where thousands of classrooms are unfilled. I got to experience sort of the why behind this turnover and what I think is a really good solution to overcoming it when I went on the unexpected journey of moving to Arizona in order to teach. I was so excited to begin my role in changing the world. I didn't know anyone in the state, but I knew that I could make a difference. I'll never forget when I got assigned my very first classroom, B136. And I remember, as I approached the classroom door, I saw that there were a whole bunch of marks where there had been different teachers' names removed. And I started to see that there was a problem with turnover. I was one of 23 brand new teachers out of 40 at my school. I learned that my students that I was about to have had had 5 teachers quit on them the year prior. 5. So imagine that. 5 teachers came into that classroom, taught, and then left these students mid-year. The trauma, the challenges, the pain, it was too much. Imagine being the parent of one of those children, or imagine being the child themselves and how that would impact you. I began to realize that there was a lot more to this changing the world business than I had originally known. When I first received files on my students, I couldn't wait. It was like Christmas. I got to open up the names of all these great kids I was going to have. And I couldn't believe the things that were written about these children. Things in writing that you should never say about anyone, written about 12-year-olds. Basically saying that these students right now would have no future. In addition to the low expectations set for them, they were facing many significant challenges: abuse, poverty. My students that I had my first year, 2 of them were in a room in the first month of school when a friend of theirs was shot in the head, 6th graders. My students were facing unbelievable challenges, and I had no idea how to handle this. I just wanted to change the world. I just wanted to make a difference, and I was very ill-equipped in order to do so. Additionally, at this time, I developed a life-threatening illness. Basically, all of my organs were failing, and it took over 10 years to diagnose what was wrong with me. This was personally challenging in addition to the professional challenges. And then on top of that, my father passed away pretty unexpectedly just a few months before I started teaching. I was very overwhelmed, both personally and professionally. I began to see that sense of burnout, that sense of feeling like, am I going to be a statistic? Am I going to be one of those people that leaves these kids? Am I going to be number 6? And my kids asked me, are you going to leave too? When are you going to leave? When are you going to be done? I had a lot of conflicting emotions exploding out of my mind. I was angry, I was sad, I was scared. I tried to build up apathy, but that's not really my style, so it didn't work very well. I spent a lot of time grieving and just kind of thinking about all of the things in the world that were really devastating, and that did nothing for my students. It was justified for me to feel sad about what was going on and what had been done, but it wasn't doing anything to change the situation. If this was a Hollywood movie, this is where I'd put on a leather jacket or play some Tupac or give that stand on the desk, life-altering speech, and everything would be great from there on out. But unfortunately, life is not a movie, and so there was no one magic solution. I realized that if I didn't figure out something different to try, that I would become one of those statistics, one of those thousands of classrooms. There was one thing I noticed when I looked around. I saw that the people who were making a difference for children and who were changing lives were the people, they weren't the most educated, they weren't the smartest, they were the people who were the most positive and who loved children the most. And that was the one thing that I could do. I didn't have the best skills, I didn't have the best intelligence, but I was like, I can love my kids so much, and if they leave this year, they will know I love them and I believed in them. I want you to think of positivity as a not an inherent character trait that some babies are born with and some just aren't, and that's just how it is, and I'm a positive person, or I'm just kind of a glass half empty person. I really want you to think of it as first a choice and then a skill. And that was a skill I really wanted to teach my students, and then eventually the future teachers I was preparing. So I began to talk to my students a lot about positivity and how we can practice it. If you wanted to run a marathon, you wouldn't say, okay, I'm just gonna go out there and run a marathon. But most people just say, okay, this new year I'm gonna be more positive. And then they don't do anything to back it up. There's no skill practice. And I decided I'm gonna come up with a systematic way to teach my students how to feel positive about themselves, about their futures, about their communities. Once we started doing this, and I started doing this practice, I began to realize that things weren't penetrating the walls of my heart anymore. The difficulties around me in schools, the life-threatening illness, the challenges that are going on nationwide, no longer were getting to me at that level, and I was starting to make a difference. I was starting to impact my students positively. And I could see them building their own system to protect their hearts from the negativity that surrounded them. I could see them spreading their positivity and their love and their belief out into the community, out into the school, out into the state. And I truly began to see the value of believing in positivity as a solution, as a skill that we can all learn. I remember talking to my students about malleable intelligence and how they too can grow their brains. And I will never forget, one little boy looked at me and said, tears in his eyes, so there's nothing wrong with my brain? I can learn just like everyone else? And it was devastating to me that he had spent his entire 12 years on earth thinking that there was. But from there on out, everything changed for him. And despite the fact that I wasn't really that great of a teacher at that point, my students' academics suddenly began to soar. I was able to stay with my first class of students for 3 years, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade, and I was able to see them develop their own leadership and positivity and their own belief that they could change the world. And all of these kids went on to graduate high school in a state with one of the highest dropout rates in the nation. After a few more years in the classroom, I realized that I wanted to broaden my reach. I never wanted to have another 6th grader get there and not be able to read, or another child to think that there was something wrong fundamentally with their brain. And so I wanted to go to one of the best teacher prep programs in the nation, and I knew that that was ASU. I was so excited to begin my work helping teachers become world-changing teachers. I realized when I first began doing this with myself and then with students, I needed a systematic way of teaching people how to think of positivity as that skill. And so this was sort of the quote that stuck out to me as the blueprint for that. Watch your thoughts, they become words. Watch your words, they become actions. Watch your actions, they become habits. Watch your habits, they become character. And watch your character, for it becomes your destiny. And I think this is something that I challenge you all to think about. Of course, you cannot have beautiful words and beautiful actions and world-changing actions unless you start with your own thoughts. Beautiful thoughts have to start. My students and my future teachers spent time with me every single day thinking about the positives in others. We would spend almost 30 minutes a day with my 6th, 7th, and 8th graders just writing down positives about their peers. And I encourage my future teachers to take on that same practice, building beautiful thoughts. This fundamentally altered the way that my students behaved towards each other. Bullying became almost non-existent. When they saw each other, their minds were trained to jump to those positives and that value that others were bringing to the table. With my future teachers and the teachers now that have graduated and are on their careers, it became a reflex. When they saw a student that they had spent so much time developing positive thoughts about, their minds immediately jumped to the beautiful things about them. When we thought about the problems that are out there, and there are many in education, and there are many things we can't control, we started to train our brains to think, what can we control? Let's make this classroom, and then our school, and then our community, this magical place where nothing can touch us, where we're gonna be positive, where we're gonna change the world together. After we harnessed our thoughts, we began to focus on our words. My students and I worked on having a 5-to-1 positive to negative ratio, and I really encourage you all to try this. Having 5 positives come out of your mouth when you talk to someone, about someone, and this may be the hardest of all, about yourself, it needs to be 5 positives for every 1 negative. It will change your life, and it changed the life of students and future teachers. I would also encourage you to do what we did and calendar out opportunities to celebrate those in your life. Celebrate people. Put on your calendar, tell someone how much you love them. Tell them how valuable they are. Tell them that you love and support them. No child, and really no adult, can hear, I love you, enough. Once we were able to harness our thoughts and our words, actions just soon began to immediately follow. And I can tell you that my students held the 2nd largest canned food drive in the state of Arizona in an environment where every single child in the class had used the food bank themselves to support their community. When there was natural disasters, when there were school shootings, there would be kids outside of my door before I got there, and I got there really early, saying, how can we help? What are we gonna do to make this positive change in the world? They believed so strongly in their own capacity to change the world that I could step aside and let them facilitate. I have also had the great opportunity to work with many, many future teachers, over 900 through my work at ASU, that have gone out there and changed the world. And what I see them doing fills my heart with pride. I see them starting clubs to help students with behavior needs. I see them leading sports. I see them teaching their students to use those skills that they learn in the classroom for community service and not just for a standardized test. And I'm so filled with pride at the work that they're doing. And that all starts with those positive thoughts, words, and actions. My future teachers hold a genre fair every year that serves over 200 students. We are very, very fortunate that we have been able to harness our thoughts and our words, and the actions just seem to follow right away. I have been able to work with the leadership at ASU and in the Tolleson Elementary School District with like-minded leaders, and we have been able to build this army of teachers that's going out there and changing the world. Despite any challenges that they face, they've built up that positivity in themselves, and they're staying in the classroom. They're winning Teacher of the Year or Treasure Hunter of the Year in their first couple years of teaching. They're being marked as highly efficient teachers in their first couple years of teaching. And I think that the key to this is their belief in the power of positivity and their belief that every child can succeed. I know that all of us, when we think about our own capacity to change the world, there can be some challenges. And I want you to know that if you get to that point where you are like, oh man, I don't know if I have that key to changing the world inside of myself, I want you to know that someone out there is counting your car, thinking about you, and thinking about all of the amazing things that you can do to change the world. Thank you.